South African Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago says workers will continue to feel the inflation pressure if they use their withdrawals from the two-pot retirement system for spending rather than to service debt. The two-pot retirement system came into effect yesterday. Kganyago says most businesses and households are feeling the pressure of inflation because they're highly indebted. Now that the system has come into effect, it has also become important for clients to understand the role of fund administrators in getting their claims paid out. Joining us to discuss this further is Siphamandla Buthelezi, NMG Benefits Head of Platforms. Good evening, Mr. Buthelezi. Thank you very much for joining us on The Full View. Now, the intention of the two-pot system has been discussed at length. We now want to shift our focus to the role of fund administrators, which is your area of specialization. We expect you will now be dealing with a high volume of withdrawal requests. Just talk us through your role.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, indeed. So I'm working for NMG Benefits as the head of executive head of platform, and I'm also looking after the retirement fund administration area. I think it goes without saying that in a 13P administration space, a space like ours, whereby we are actually servicing the number of corporate clients, that the role of the fund administrators is one critical role that needs to be thoroughly understood. So in our case at NMG, our clients are fund administrators. So our clients are funds, corporate funds, and we then service the clients in the form of dealing with the trustees, the board of trustees, the principal officers. We seldom get to interact with the members. I think what's happening, for an example, now with the two-pot is that there's going to be a lot of interaction with the members, which then again emphasize on the importance of just understanding the role of the fund administrator. What will one actually understood from the fund administrator as a member of the fund is it only takes place when someone needs to claim, right? Often members will only when they're at the claim stage, when they will have to send the application form requesting their money. It's only at that point where they are actually dealing with the fund administrator. And what often happened at that point in time is that we often realize that actually the members don't fully understand what is the role of the fund administrator. I'm saying this because it becomes a very frustrating process for the member who's trying to get their money. In as far as they are concerned, once they submitted the form, it should be as easy as them getting paid. But actually, the process is more complicated than that. One will have to understand that the process starts by the fund administrator being informed of the member leaving the fund, and that often takes place at the time when the member is still serving the notice period with the employer. So at that point in time,
pardon me for interjecting here. So you're taking us through the general role, not necessarily just the two-pot here. So it's the general role of the fund administrator, be it when you retire or when you're resigning.
100%.
All right.
100%, yes. So the first thing that happened is a notification to the administrator to say this member will be leaving the fund, and that usually happens at the point where the member is serving the notice. From the member's point of view, you will understand that probably the member at that point in time, they think that by the time they finish their notice period with the employer, that they will get the payment for their retirement fund as well, which is often not the case at all, right? And the reason why it's not the case, it's simply because when we get notified, the administrator at that point in time cannot pay the claim. One of the reasons why the administrator cannot pay the claim is simply because the administrator still needs to wait for the last contribution to actually be invested and then start the claim process.
So your employer's last contribution, and I believe there's also the verification of bank accounts, all of that is quite important, which to a certain extent delays the process, including tax thereof.
Absolutely. And just to give you a typical example, the employer has up until the 7th of the following month to actually pay the contribution to the fund administrator. And then furthermore, they have up until the 15th of the month to actually submit the schedule. So you can imagine that investing the last contribution, it's something that happens way after the 15th of the month. By that time, the member who is not well informed is already thinking that the administrator is not paying my money. It's been 20 days, 15 days since I left the employment. So after that, then there's a process of tax application as well, which is usually the huge complexity in the process, because depending on the status of the member with SARS, whether there is a right tax number, whether there is any pending tax matters that needs to be rectified with SARS. All of those things can actually delay the process further. And once that is clear, then that is done, then we verify the banking details and in order for us to make sure that we're paying the right member. And verifying the banking details is also not as simple as just getting the proof of bank. So we need to do bank verification through other bank channels in order to make sure that we get a unique match between the identity number of the member and actually the bank account number. That on its own is a process. It's usually quicker if the account has been open for longer and it's in use. But in some instances, you find out that the member wants to be paid into a brand new account, and that also further complicates the process.
Now, Siphamandla, the million-dollar question is whether the same process would be followed by the fund administrators now with the two-pot system, just to almost manage the expectations of some of those that are looking to withdraw, because some of them assume that they'll quickly get the funds.
Yeah, look, in terms of the verification tax application, 100% yes. The same process has to be followed. We will have to apply for tax, we'll have to verify the banking details. And you can imagine that now with the two-pot, because we're dealing with thousands and thousands of applications, the process might be slightly delayed. But I think the two-pot process might be easier in a sense that it doesn't wait for the last contribution, which actually takes much time. So in terms of the timelines, it might be quicker in that aspect. But in terms of the tax application, the bank verification, it would follow exactly the same process.
But it seems others are worried about the large volumes of withdrawal applications, that in as much as you wouldn't wait for that last contribution from the employer, just the sheer volumes could probably see this process being delayed. We could even see some people even protesting at some point.
100%. I mean, since this morning, you can only imagine the number of calls that we're getting from members, and everyone thinks they're going to get their money the following day. But also, it depends on their tax matters with SARS as well, because sometimes you get a decline from the tax application, and as an administrator, you can't resolve that decline for the member. Sometimes it requires the member to go to SARS to go and resolve that. But you are 100% correct. It's going to be delayed. There is high volumes. There's going to be pressure on system and people, and while it's easy to do all these verification checks for one member that's leaving the fund, now we're dealing with thousands of members that we're going to have to actually go through the same process for.
All right, Siphamandla, thank you very much for your insights this evening. That's Siphamandla Buthelezi, NMG Benefits Head of Platforms.